city you burn, I'm gonna build one high.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show. All right, guys. It is Friday. Happy Friday. Welcome to the beginning of the weekend. And, you know, all of the big news came out yesterday. We did a whole episode on the event that I believe is coming out next week, almost shortly. And all the pieces to that, and we have the website. The Notion has its own article page of it, and I stayed up last night pretty late going through and actually editing it down because I want this to be information that a lot of people can watch. So I trimmed it as hard as I possibly could. Edward Scissorhands it. I took it from an hour and 35 minutes to an hour and 5 minutes. So I cut... Oh, we're about to watch it, Jita. That's what we're doing. So basically, I cut it down by a third without removing any actual information. I don't know what that tells me about, like, my presentation. No, it's fine. You know, whatever. Like, I cut off any point where I, like, have to think about things. Longer gaps. Because what is a natural pause in conversation, even like a pause for emphasis, just doesn't fly on YouTube. So you just chop them all out. Either way. My point is, I did have something I wanted to present to you guys, but I'm not sure if I'm ready yet still. And I was thinking I wanted to have just a chill day because I had all that stuff about the event, figuring it out, making the video, doing the stuff for you guys. And then on my other hat, like obviously we are incredibly interested in the event. So go into, you know, setting up in-game stuff as well. So things are getting busy. Oh no, we are going. We're going to go through. I have a lot to say, and it's going to be the framework by which we talk about it. We're going to go through the whole thing. Yeah, so I'm not going to necessarily get into something super deep. We don't really have anything to tear apart. We did all that yesterday. So today, we are going to watch the latest Josh Strife Haves video. I guess before we do, I was a little bit of an aside. I wasn't agonizing a little bit about, like, doing a stream where I'm reacting to him, to his video. He's a YouTuber. We'll get there. Retro. Because one of the things is that he's made a whole series where he kind of meta jokes around about the concept of reaction videos, right? What is an acceptable amount of reaction, all that kind of stuff, right? So making a reaction video against him, like, I'm sure that it'd be fine, but, you know, I just need to make sure that I add plenty of content. So then I tweet about it that, hey, I'm planning on doing Josh Strife Hayes, Hayes' video and look at it from what it tells us about EVE Online. And I added him just so I can be like, at least I've told him. And he liked the tweet. So I think I'm in for a penny, so I'm in for a pound at this point. All right. I don't know. I might tell the story again when we get into the main block of it, but I'm not sure. You saw something posted by CCP? Oh, don't ruin another day of trying to do something else. Did they just up? Let me go update Oblique. What? Did I see? That's just vague enough that maybe. Uh-oh. What is that? Oh, reaction video meta. Okay. Sorry, Two Left Skis. If you do need to post a link, you can always just ask for permission. Like a, I need to do like an exclamation point permit so that way the bot doesn't like kill you. Yeah, I can. Just like that. Thank you. Permit cam. There we go. Yeah, that's true. Just ask out loud. Oh. Well, no. Wait. That's from 2 days ago. I'm confused. This one? I have no flow. We're fine. This is the before show. It's fine. Oh. This made you think of me? Aw. Yeah, we've been covering this pretty aggressively. Like I said, tomorrow. Don't worry about it, two left skis. It's fine. Everyone does it. It's totally fine. I appreciate you bringing the link. And by that I mean you should feel awful. I don't know. Give me 100 bits for penance or something. That's fair, Crimson. Although, also to be fair, that's why I gave you mod powers. So, hey man, I've been watching a lot of other people, like other YouTubers and stuff. I'm starting to figure it out, DM. It's good. No, it's fine. Like I said, you can't disrupt right now. We're just kind of chilling out while people trickle in. I figure, so I did a 1-minute ad as it was starting up, and that pre-roll ends in 8 minutes. So then we'll just hit another minute ad, and then we'll jump into the main thing. That seems like a fair plan. Yeah. No. So what it was basically where I'm at right now, what you see behind me. But in this area, there's new like Mimitar rats roaming around. And starting last week, killing them dropped a thing that had a video, which was this probe. And then along with some like schematic data that gave us a clue as to what the new faction frigates were going to be. And then, so I think I made a video about that. I don't know if I had time to, because like a day or two later, they came out with them on Singularity, and we, like, literally I hit live as they were going live on Singularity. So like I was going to do something else, read a chronicle, and then somebody comes in and goes, new ships on Singularity, and I go look, and like Hobo Leaks was updated 9 minutes ago, and I've been live for 9.5 minutes. That video is up on my YouTube right now. I want to go back through on that other video and edit it at least one more time, because all I did was edit it to chop things out. I want to like maybe add text in a few places. Like I found a couple of things I probably want to like put a correction on top. Like there was one chunk of time where I continually referred to the Galente Caldari war zone as the Amar Mimitar war zone. It was very clear what I was doing, but I should absolutely make fun of myself in editing. Yeah, we Remy, we looked at that yesterday. That's all on there. In fact, if you guys want to watch that video earlier, you can DM me and I can probably just link it. It's on YouTube right now, unlisted for like patrons and stuff. At least it will be on for patrons when I link it to them. It was late last night, dude. Okay, I hit render. Then this morning I hit render, and then as soon as the render was done, I hit upload, and then I went to bed. Anywho. yeah, the bottom line is that starting next week, things are going to get really exciting. It's an opportunity to live a moment of Eve history and possibly help control what happens. There will be some pretty significant ramifications based on winners or losers. I did find out, apparently, I heard from somebody that CCP has said that the solution to the problem with the Stargate. So sorry, let me back up. As I was editing last night, it occurred to me, wait a minute. So one of the features of the new faction warfare system is the front lines. And a front line is a system is a front line if it's adjacent to a system controlled by the opposing faction. And this includes that opposing faction's HiSec. So the systems that are adjacent to the faction's HiSec can never be anything besides contested or owned by that faction. So for instance, Old Man Star. Old Man Star is adjacent to Valor. So either the Galente owns it, in which case it can be frontline, rearguard, or command post, depending on which one or how far it is from the nearest Caldari-owned system. But even if the Caldari owned the entire war zone, OMS would still be a frontline. Yeah, you should, man. If in like 2 weeks, it's gonna be a shit show. First of all, no, I'm not CSM. Yeah, I've been playing since 2010. I started podcasting in 2012. I've written for About Eve since like 2013, 2014. And I've always focused on kind of meta-analysis and like the things that aren't always like the things that everybody else is obsessed with. Like I don't really focus on nullsec stuff. And by meta-analysis, I mean like how does this thing fit into the larger context, right? That's why I say I put Eve into context for my fellow Empyreans. So, right. Yeah, and yesterday, like I said, we went over all of the details about the new feature. Let me at least link the page. We do have the Notion. I don't remember how to pull it up on the bot to do it this way because I'm bad. So that is the baseline of our Notion, which has all kinds of useful resources for you guys. It has the lore portal and the Magic 14, also in a format that can be copied and used as a skill plan. All the infographics, the information about the Abyss, including my Abyss infographic, etc. However, in this case, you actually need to go into the members area because I haven't figured out how to sort all of the details yet. Right now, events are in members area just because I haven't figured it out yet. Maybe I should just move it to public. But either way, let me link this. There's a button that says share. Where is it? Copy link. Whew. The Discord link says it's invalid. Amazing. Okay. Really? Oh, wait. The Discord link on which? On the Notion? The COE Discord link on the Notion is invalid. Well, Tell you what. That link does work. Should work. Better work. If that doesn't work, I'm going to be mad at people. Also, Aderon.org should have it as well. Okay. We are probably past our time to... Yep. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit the ad for 1 more minute. And then when you guys tell me you guys are back, we will restart. And then we'll begin this video. What's up, Sugar Baby? I am doing really good. As I was just saying, there's just so much going on in EVE. Both like trying to cover it and also trying to be prepared for it. That, like... Even trying to like log in for my island sanctuary right now gives me anxiety. But I miss you guys, and I'll come jump in. Sugar Baby runs the free company that I'm part of. If you want to go keep them company while I can't be there, go ahead and follow that link and say hi for Final Fantasy XIV. Okay. But what we're doing, right before we start again, so I'm going to do the ad, but then after that, we're going to be watching Josh Strife Hayes' horizontal versus vertical design video, with the idea in mind of what can we learn about EVE Online, or what can we apply to EVE Online, or how can we apply this to how we think about EVE Online, or our understanding of it. So, awesome. See you guys in a minute. Now that all the silly people are gone, and all that's left are ad blockers and payers. He does have great content. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, Jameson. What's up, Valamir? We're just doing the ad, and then we'll get started. Actually, I'm going to mute. Since we're going to be listening to his thing. Okay. Everyone's back? Yeah, it says it's over. Great. All right. So, marker. Here we go. Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. What I have here is the latest video from a content creator, YouTuber, Twitch streamer named Josh Strife Hayes. I've loved his work. I've referred to it before. I believe I've made entire videos off of some of the stuff he's talked about before. But this video jumped out at me as being very insightful when it comes to understanding EVE Online and maybe some of the kind of conflicts and understanding that we sometimes have between player base and designers and different members of the player base and our expectations of EVE Online. So this game is about, so we're going to watch this video and react to it. I'll pause it, and we'll use this as an opportunity to as a launching off point for discussion. All right. So, and by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, this will be in the links down below. Please, Josh Strife Hayes is an amazing video creator. Several of his videos, I feel, communicated a lot of stuff about EVE Online and other, the game design as a concept, especially his one on sandboxes versus theme parks. Helped me think about the whole problem a little bit better. He's got a way of like taking the thing that we all know and talk about and actually say what it is. And that's what I like about it. So make sure to go follow him and all that stuff. But let's jump into it.
MMORPG games have a ton of content, from epic quests where you help others to life skills where you can relax and forge your own little existence, dungeons and raids rewarding powerful weapons and armour, or hidden areas where the only reward is the warm fuzzy feeling you get for finding a secret. The content you personally enjoy will help guide the game you play. There's no perfect design, but the idea of progression on a journey is universal across most RPG games. You adventure, you experience, and you grow, and within that progression there are two primary schools of design: vertical progression and horizontal progression.
Okay, so that presents the question that we are going to be trying to answer here, at least at the beginning, which is, which kind of progression does EVE Online have or focus on? Okay? What is EVE Online of these two?
Let's discuss what they are, the strengths and weaknesses of both, and the type of player that each appeal to. Quick note, this video is sponsored by Guild Wars 2, which is super convenient for me because I was going to use them as an example anyway. Welcome, I'm Josh Strife Hayes. I've played a lot of MMORPGs, and while each is magically different in its own unique way, they all broadly appeal to one of two demographics: people who like vertical progression and people who like horizontal progression. But what do these terms mean? Imagine a vertical line with increasing numbers marked on it, let's say from 1 to 10. This line represents power, with 1 being weak and 10 being strong. We can take anything from the game, any weapon or piece of armour or equipment, and place it somewhere on this scale. A bronze dagger in RuneScape may be a 1, an abyssal whip may be a 7. Ultimately, everything can be ranked. Vertical progression is the design of things at the top being the most desirable and things lower down simply being stepping stones used to reach the things at the top. You will go through.
So there seems to be an element of this in EVE Online, obviously, right? Because you can unlock, stronger things. You can accumulate more ISK. And with more ISK, you can bling out your ships better, or get blingier ships. So there definitely is like a sense of progression. We'll keep watching.
Through the numbers from lower to higher, ultimately wanting to get to and remain at the highest number. If an MMORPG is a vertical progression...
So that's the thing. There is no highest number, right? So that's the first clue.
Game, this table ends up being taller than it is wide. The aim is to climb and stay there. This appeals to people who want the best stuff. It appeals to people who value power over the experience. Horizontal progression is slightly different. It's not that horizontal games don't have the vertical scale, it's that they spread wider than they go tall. You may have multiple items.
Okay, so a horizontal progression can have verticality.
Items of the same general strength, but they're achieved in different ways. They may be situational instead of objectively better. The scope of experience in the game is usually...
So, okay, different things of relatively the same power, less about scales of power, more about versatility. So let's look at that. We have the ship tree, right? So if we open up our ship tree, we see that, I mean, it's literally horizontal progression, right? Like, there is verticality, but if you notice, the idea is that most of these are not stronger than one another. They're fundamentally different. And if you think about it, it's even built into the design of the entire tech tree, right? Because Tech 1 is versatile, Tech 2 is specialized. So there's a baked in, cost benefit to a lot of this progression. It's mostly about having more options and being able to do more and different things rather than continually upgrading your ship into the one thing you do. Ha, do. All right.
Broader and older content remains relevant a lot longer at the expense of the power cap being generally lower. So let's look at some examples and discuss the strengths and weaknesses of both designs, and then maybe you'll discover which design you are most attracted to. I'm going to cover 7 main aspects of the design debate. 1. Chasing power versus...
Okay, so I think that from there we can say that Eve, between the two, I would argue that it is a wide design, right? If you think about it, wide designs have a lot of things to do, but still can have verticality. But the issue is that whenever I hear about, especially the angst that we've been hearing about EVE Online, it usually is arguments from verticality. We have enough verticality that people are looking at things exclusively from that regard. So we're going to look at like some of the differences between the two, and we're going to see where both sides problems crop up, and also the unique mixture that Eve has a tendency to mitigate some of the other problems.
Is the process itself. 2. The viability of older content. 3. Balancing the power standards. 4. Power creep versus feature creep. 5. Stat or feature squishing. 6. The ability to take a break and then return to the game. And 7. The personal drive of social power or personal enjoyment. But before we analyse these 7 points, a big thank you to Guild Wars 2 for agreeing to sponsor this video. I've played Guild Wars 2 since it launched all the way back in 2012, and it's been one of the few MMOs I've installed on every PC I've had since then, and finally, after like 5 years of coming soon, it's actually released on Steam. They've even released 2 very positive reviews. The latest expansion, End of Dragons, brings a ton of new content without invalidating the previous expansions Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, but you don't need to buy anything to try the game. There is a massive...
I do appreciate that in the video about horizontal versus vertical progression, directly after he referred to how vertical progression invalidates previous progression, he specifically points out that the game that he is talking about here does not invalidate the previous content. I found that kind of an interesting thing to pull out.
Free trial. The base game is free with no time limit, and if you do like it, it is a one-time purchase with no monthly sub. Once you own Guild Wars 2, you own it. And given the amount of hours I've got out of this game, Guild Wars 2 is probably the best value money I've ever spent on a video game. To celebrate the Steam launch, there's a link in the description. You can sign up, get a code, and grab the game on Steam, and then if you want, you can redeem the code for an experience boost pack, some karma boosting, and a 10-slot bag with a mini pet. This all saves you about $10, and it's free, so there's no reason not to. There's a new player guide on the website, although the in-game tutorial is actually really good. There's great build variety in the classes, and the mount system is so good it is now the standard by which other games are to be judged. Now, regular viewers will know that I don't accept sponsorships unless I can personally vouch for the product, and honestly, Guild Wars 2 is just a really good MMORPG game with a great deal of content that every player should at least try. But to sweeten the deal even more, one lucky user who uses this code will get the $100 pack on Steam, including all the Guild Wars 2 content, absolutely free. Check the video description for more details. Right, back to vertical versus horizontal design. Let's start with the basics. The most simple...
In case you guys need it, I linked the code in chat and I guess down below. What's up, Combat Bunny? We are going over Josh Hayes' video on horizontal versus vertical design. We've just kind of started to get into it.
Appeal of vertical design is the chasing of power. The best item, the best armor, the best spell. The numbers are simply higher. You can compare and contrast every item in the game and see at a glance, objectively, which is a better choice.
So this was one of the very first things that made me realize that I wanted to react about this. Because again, this dissonance of the way that the players see things and the way that the game is developed and built, is the discordance between that is something that has been frustrating me for some time. So this really slid into place a big piece of what was going on, right? So these guys that are complaining that their Titans were nerfed and that their Titans should be good because they paid so much for it, or because they got it, or slot in rock walls or whatever. What we're really hearing is an evaluation from a vertical point of view. I have walked the path. I am beyond the things below it, and now I have earned the right to have the best thing, right? But Eve itself is not about necessarily the best thing, right? So one of the questions that I have that I think we might actually be able to answer here is why does that happen, right? Why do people take on this new idea, or this relatively new idea, of the idea that Eve is a race to an end game and then you're at the end game? Because that is not the way it has been always. This is a relatively new phenomena that people have kind of stopped resisting that concept.
Sword doing 1 damage compared to a sword doing 10 damage. Higher number, better. This can lead to game design where a single choice is objectively correct for the majority of gaming situations, and that choice has no variations within itself. If there is a best weapon in the game, everyone wants to get it and use it. That is the power you chase. For vertical players, the actual experience of getting the power comes second to having the power itself. They value the reward over the process. In horizontal progression,
however, what's interesting here is that you can look at the game from a second perspective. And from this perspective, it starts to make sense, which is the meta perspective, right? In the same way that ISK is not power in Eve, right? Because if I have 5 million ISK versus 30 million ISK, sure, I'm way more powerful. If I have 300 million ISK, I'm probably way more powerful. If I have 3 billion ISK, I'm definitely more powerful, but now I'm basically able to just refit the powerful stuff more often. I can deal with more loss or whatever. By the time I get up to like 500 billion ISK, more ISK is not giving me more raw power. It might be giving me more sustain, but honestly, it allows me to, it enables me to have my options, right? So I want to accumulate ISK as power, not because it gives me like more powerful swords, but rather it makes me more powerful in the meta game. Sorry, I think that the important thing here is that this scales up to organizations too. And that's where you really start to see it, because an organization is a meta construct, right? So this is one of those reasons why maybe games with a thing like nullsec naturally collapse towards one powerful group. Because in the end, the desire to be the strongest over time is relegated to be part of this team or not be the strongest.
it's less about the power and more about variation and experience. The process is now more important than the reward, because the reward isn't specifically any more powerful than what you already have. Imagine you have a weapon which does X amount of damage, and there's another weapon in the game which also does X damage but now looks different or is achieved in a more difficult way. A good example would be the ornamental kits in Old School RuneScape or RuneScape 3. They make the weapon look different visually, but they act identical mechanically. You won't gain any extra power from having the weapon itself, but you will have the experience of getting it.
So that is another interesting point, hold on.
Focus is on variations, not greater items. But how
Eve kind of takes this and puts a spin on it, right? In other, we can look at that last statement. You know, I get a different weapon that is not more powerful, but maybe a different option. What we could actually rephrase that as saying that they are functionally fungible, right? It doesn't actually matter which sword I have, except for, like, to me. So, in that regard, ISK is the ultimate version of that. We don't do the activities that we do for the reward of that activity, right? This is minerals you mine yourself aren't free. We always consider, because of the fact that this is an open market game and everything can be bought and sold, your product isn't, you don't have to go do a specific thing to get a specific thing, which naturally funnels us towards more efficient processes over a variety of processes or something along those lines, right? Regardless of whether or not, you know, in the argument of, you know, ISK per hour, fun per hour, whatever, the big difference is you're still deciding what you do and do that one thing. We don't have the thing where in places like Final Fantasy 14 or whatever, where in a day, if you actually want to do content for more than a couple of hours, you're probably going to have to do a variety of things. You're going to quickly run out of your ability to do that thing because everything's kind of limited in how much you can make a little bit of progress in everything each day. And then it becomes less efficient in pretty significant ways, right? It encourages you to do a variety of activities every single time. Eve encourages a variety of activities because the passivity of many of the processes means that you can keep plates spinning and therefore have multiple income streams. But it's not like you're doing any given specific thing for its specific reward. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good or bad thing. Volatile skins was a terrible idea, at least in the way that they did them. But I do think that unique rewards, there's a place in the game for unique rewards for doing specific things. For instance, titles or stuff that you can only get by doing specific achievements or whatever. Proving ground skins is a good example of that.
How does this affect the game when you've got everything and new content has to be added? With vertical design focusing on the reward and horizontal focusing on the process, the risk for vertical comes in the form of, once a player has the power, why would they go through any process?
The problem with both... hey, thank you. The real problem with both of those solutions, metals and the abyssal skins, is that while they both are things to collect, we're actually talking about two different things here. Because what I'm talking about is an activity, a kind of grinding. I know that that sounds bad, but like ultimately these are paths that are being walked, right? So tying it to a certain amount of activity in faction warfare or a certain achievement or maybe a rare site that can only be found very rarely as a data site or whatever, like those would be the kind of things that I'm talking about, things that you can, work towards as opposed to tokens of victory. Does that make sense?
Process when they know it would reward a less powerful item. If your player base values being the most powerful and they are the most powerful, other content loses its appeal. This is a major problem with vertical design. It invalidates old content extremely quickly.
So this is how we know that deep down inside, the development of Eve isn't, like the design of Eve at least, is not overly vertical. If you built an Armageddon 15 years ago, it is still as relevant, maybe not as relevant, but still a powerful force, right? It's not a relic of a bygone era that can be crushed by the nearest frigate that has come out in the latest expansion, right? But it may be fundamentally different than it once was, but it'll still be a relevant thing and likely worth the same amount, roughly, relationally, to what it was before.
If a dungeon drops a weapon or armor set and then a new dungeon drops a better one, the old dungeon simply becomes a stepping stone to the higher one, but then forgotten about once the higher one is achieved.
But wait, we do have this problem. But we have it in the content itself. When we're talking about this, think about it this way. It's the meta progression, right? The problem here is that a new bro, based on new skills, can only do low-tier activities. Low-tier activities don't reward as well. But since you vertically progress on a meta scale, that means getting past that is the goal. That results in two things. One, it results in that pressure for buying skill injectors, all of this angst about that kind of thing, and more importantly, the frustration of needing to skill really is driven home by that, right? And these accusations that CCP is intentionally trying to sell skill injectors by making changes or whatever, right? But the other problem is that what that means is all of that other content is considered worthless by the community. The thing is that a new bro doesn't need a fabulous amount of ISK. A new bro doesn't even need to actually have an Omega account. A new bro needs to learn how to fly and how the game works. Okay? Doing easy content with cheaper equipment is the thing that they should be doing. And if they have a good mentor, yeah, the air career program has actually come a long ways. Maybe I'll jump back into that. But if they have a good mentor, then they could use that to quickly, get on their feet and progress and move on. But when we explain to people, when we set the standard of what a high skill point person can attain as far as ISK per hour or whatever, like, that's where a lot of this pressure comes from. And what I always wonder is, how much do we cheapen the experience when we do that? And do we risk, by doing so, do we risk that new bro not being able to fully appreciate what is there or gain their own sense of mastery? But either way, back to the career agent, the air career agent. All of that's why I really like the air career agents and where they're going with it. And the symptom of that is actually, and one of them is in chat right now, I believe. But now all of the names are falling out of my head. There's been a couple of new bros recently that I've been watching. And Combat Bunny, I believe. Yes. These guys that are playing the game, what I'm seeing is new bros with objectives. I'm seeing them open up the air career agent thing to look for things to do. I literally heard a new bro complimenting the new player experience, and another new bro complimenting the UI. I was in chat with CCP Swift, and some new bro was like, "Man, this UI is actually really great." And I was like, "Yeah, Swift, how everybody always talks about how great the EVE UI is."
Vertical progression attracts players who want to climb up, and everything lower than where they are is seen as pointless. New content doesn't become more of the game, it sometimes becomes the only part of the game worth doing.
So this is actually the real problem. This is where all of the problems that we've been talking about, or all the pieces that we've just been talking about, collide, right? When everything is worth ISK, if everything breaks down to its value in ISK, then all content that CCP introduces for all levels will be evaluated upon all of the other options that already exist. That is one of the biggest design puzzles that they find themselves in. This is one of the reasons why it's difficult for some of these new features. That's why we see a lot of cynicism when it comes to events or other things that are coming out, right? Because ultimately they can quickly look at it, see that it doesn't provide anything for them, or it's not got the bigger number, and therefore write it off. That's a concern.
Ironically, an expansion doesn't actually expand a game if it becomes the only part of the game worth focusing on. Now, horizontal design often links together older content with newer content because the focus isn't on outclassing, but supporting. This isn't to say the rewards for new content aren't more powerful. They can be, but they are never completely eclipsed by new things, or the time taken to advance on the vertical ladder is still great enough that old content is still worth doing.
Don't worry, Valamir. You'd probably find their content not really valuable either. No, I'm just kidding. So, again, like, the thing is here that when we look at content as different ships to fly, this is 100% true. When we look at content as things to do, it becomes a little bit more questionable.
Consider a new expansion in World of Warcraft. When something new comes out, the older content and the older expansions are often outclassed in terms of power. The best items from 10 years ago are superseded by average items from now. But for an excellent example of horizontal design in content, look at the Barrows armor in old school RuneScape. The Barrows minigame released in 2005 and the rewards from it remained relevant for years. Indeed, old school RuneScape itself released in 2013 and the Barrows minigame is still a vital part of a new player journey. Despite many similar rewards now existing, it's not been overshadowed. When an MMORPG receives new, high-level content, vertical MMOs often watch older content become irrelevant because the power level has risen, and horizontal MMOs watch older content become another piece in a greater puzzle as the variation increases. But both of these can lead to issues.
So, this is actually one of the things that has always attracted me to EVE, and is one of the things that always is kind of lauded as a big strength of EVE, especially back when we had regular expansions, which thankfully we're getting back to. But a WoW expansion is about the new, this is what the new graphics looks like. These are the new monsters. This is the new dungeons. But if you think about it, you always have the current content, the content that's one step behind the content, which is your leveling or your gearing content or whatever, and then everything else, and things quickly fall off into what I call the museum, right? Because you go through those dungeons simply to be like, oh yeah, and over here we used to do this, and obviously that isn't the way things happen in EVE, but at the same time, we actually run into an issue between the way that EVE does it and the way that he describes it here, which is that EVE features often don't always interconnect in the same way that you would expect. Often these are independent of each other, which, I mean, it is what it is. The other thing is that we'll talk about that later.
With point 3. Power creep versus feature creep. If your game is vertical, players want more power. If your game is horizontal, players want more choice. Adding power is simple. Increase a number, weapon do more damage, armor stop more damage. Even releasing a new class or race like Neverwinter did with the Metallic Dragonborn and just straight up giving them better passive buffs. Adding more power patch by patch is super simple, but it leads to the inevitable endgame of power creep. When everyone is godlike, no one is.
So one of the arguments I've been hearing recently is like, well, why doesn't CCP come out with T2 capitals? Why doesn't CCP come out with more faction capitals? Why doesn't CCP come out with a T2 Titan? Whatever. This is why. Because all you're asking for is just another race that you'll race up to the top, and then you'll be at the top again. And then you want more, and then you want more. And the problem is that what's really happening is we're stretching the path and further and further if you're looking at it as a path, or the gulf further and further if you're looking at it as horizontal. If these things are supposed to be interacting with each other, the further the distance and verticality they are, the less likely that's going to work out well.
Power is only powerful when compared to something less so, and when everyone is hitting millions of damage, the number itself isn't considered large, that's just normal. A player who wants to be considered powerful must be compared against a player of lesser power. So by increasing the power cap every update, you're adding small but constant windows of gameplay where the players race to achieve the increase in power and enjoy being more powerful for a short time before inevitably everyone catches up, so you increase it again, and you repeat this forever. Horizontal progression, however, may avoid that absurd degree of power creep, but it still faces the equally complex issue of feature creep. If a new update in a horizontal game can't simply make a number bigger, it needs to change something mechanically, adding a new choice, a new situational effect, a new experience for the player, a weapon which has elemental damage or does more damage at nighttime, or armor which works better when you stand still. If you can't just make a number go up, you have to make the gameplay experience change, and while this is great in the short term, it can lead to a massive amount of intricate features being added which are overwhelming when a new player joins and has to understand all of them in one go. Feature creep can sometimes even be more insidious because the enfranchised player base doesn't realize how complex.
That's actually a really big thing that we've heard already. Like this has been a big theme of ours, right? For Eve. CCP was talking about this during some of their later presentation. I don't remember exactly when they were talking about it the most, but the issue is that compared to 20 years ago, this game is so much, there's so much more to learn, right? That the barrier to entry to understanding is so much greater than it ever, like what it takes to be good. It was harsher back then, but what you were expected to know was a much smaller quantity of things.
Can sometimes even be more insidious because the enfranchised player base doesn't realize how complex their game has become as they've adapted to each feature change slowly. It doesn't.
And that right there is my YouTube channel in a sentence, right? Like, yeah, that's the problem, is that our experienced players don't think about the game in the framework of a player that is learning it. And this, they don't remember what it took for them to learn.
Feel much more different because things were added one at a time. But then a new player joins and they're told
Also
about
that.
many systems added slowly over many years, and they're expected to understand how they all link together.
The other problem here, though, with Eve is that because they're not linked always together, and because ISK allows you to kind of abstract anything that you don't want to deal with, what this means is that experienced players actually resist learning about new things. So they actually just continue to live in their mastered niche. Newer players end up knowing more about the newer stuff than experienced players do. And then when the experienced player stuff gets disrupted, they feel like there's nothing left to do.
Together. Sometimes these negatives can actually combine and you end up with an MMORPG adding updates or content which both increases the power level substantially enough to invalidate old content and add new complex systems which are overwhelming for new or returning players. These types of updates are often met with major backlash from the player base and result in people leaving. For a great example, see the evolution of combat for RuneScape back in the day. But this leads
So one of the things, hold on.
on to point 4.
Oh, yeah. But here's the thing, though. EVE Online, my question is, has EVE Online had a stat squish or a feature squish? It's been around for 20 years. you'd think that if either of these two problems happened, we would see symptoms of it. So, given the fact that it's mostly wide, the thing is that we haven't really seen that much feature squish in Eve, right? With a few exceptions, we don't see systems being removed from the game. But that got me thinking. This is one of the reasons that why I realized that there's a way to you evaluate this both as a individual game design point of view and also from a meta perspective. Because while that's true about the things you can do and the powers within ships and all that stuff, it only gets more and more and more. The roles can get removed. What my friend who quit the game because the idea of like the all day long roll call booster foreman for his mining corp was taken away when off grid boosting was taken away. Like that was a feature. That was a feature squish. It was a feature being removed. Like, but a feature as in that play style. So it exists in that sense, but it is still pretty rare. And so I kept chewing on this, and it's like, why? How does EVE Online resist that? And I think that the real reason why is because CCP aggressively cannibalizes their content for the new content. We don't get a new ship that fits a new option. They take an old ship that's not working, rip it apart, and stuff the new stuff in. Right? Simultaneously cutting back away from something that isn't working and adding something that is. And so given the fact that CCP continually cannibalizes things, they don't just add a feature, they redo the feature or whatever, or at least continue to tweak it or whatever. Like, my point is that they avoid having to have a big change where they have to like rip out a whole chunk because they make it as a change as opposed to a removal. Does that make sense? But on the other hand, I realized that a stat squish has actually happened in EVE Online not too long ago. Think about it. What is a stat squish? A stat squish is when the numbers when everybody's trying to get their numbers higher, we change the scale on which the numbers are measured that compresses it, bringing the bottom and the top closer together. That's effectively what you're actually doing. Scarcity was EVE Online's stat squish. Prove me wrong.
Developers must know that power creep or feature creep exists, and they must realise the issue. So why do they do either one? Well, it's because the player base that game is aiming at actually values the advantage they can gain from...
Scarcity was... So basically in around 2020, really starting in 2019, CCP transitioned how they did things. Before that, we kind of escalated up to the point where now people are building Titans pretty regularly. People had been given the tools to amass massive amounts of wealth. And so through a course of some pretty aggressive changes and other meddling, CCP made it so that a lot of things were more expensive, tried to drain coffers, tried to add complexity into systems that were too simple, or, add more degrees of decision making in places. And in the end, it ripped apart a lot of things. It hurt a lot of people because your progress got squished. But unlike a game like World of Warcraft, where you can kind of see that and externalize it and conceptualize it, because we're so emotionally invested in our power level in EVE, watching that get impacted is bad. Yeah. In a lot of ways, scarcity was good for new bros or other people that were willing to take advantage of it. It was very bad for the most established easier, I guess, options for wealth generation in the game.
Being the player to exploit that change. Players who enjoy games with power creep often enjoy the power creep because it's a measure.
Eve got harder. No, what they did was like, so a good example is the industry changes. T1 is dirt simple when it comes to industry. It's take minerals, take blueprint, smash them together, thing pops out, right? T2 industry is fabulously complicated. You have to invent the BPC. You have to have the correct data cores, which are based on which each individual item. Each individual item also has usually 2 or more different products that are pulled from different moons. These moons can be, but not always, are from different areas of space. So all this stuff needs to get brought in. Reactions need to be done. Formulas have to be made. Then that invented blueprint has to be used with an original Tech 1 to build the Tech 2 with the extra bonus stuff. It's a huge jump. So what they did was they took the easier version of that reactions chain and they put it on battleships and faction stuff. So now there's kind of they didn't make the entire game harder, but they took a chunk of the easy part and made it a little bit harder so that way it functions as a stepping stone for the actual more complicated stuff.
Measurable way to be more powerful than someone else. This is especially prevalent in PvP games or on PvP servers.
So this is really, really the section where you have to think about this in the terms of an alliance, not just an individual. Because if you think about it, that is actually how we acquire power past the extent of our skills and ISK and ship, right? Like at a certain point, the accumulation of power is the accumulation of a powerful alliance, not powerful gear.
Where creating a power imbalance in your favor is literally part of the experience. You can have a better weapon or a better set of armor, and you can use that power to defeat someone else. The imbalance is by design, and new players will struggle to beat old players because the maths simply doesn't allow it.
Boom. And that is one of the reasons why newer players say that they can't catch up, right? Because even though we all know that, a new player can actually become just as effective as an experienced player in any given thing pretty easily, they look at the massive web of connections and power that has been assembled by these established groups and see that as something that's it's not that I'm never going to have a good enough ship to fight that fight. It's that I'm never going to beat that guy pointing at the mountain.
A vertical progression game encourages players to climb the ladder by letting them compete with players higher up on it and losing, or compete with players lower down and winning. That's the revenge. This may be in direct PvP or by playing with more powerful players, seeing them and thinking, I want to be that. If power creep is designed to encourage that competitive mentality by making power so easy to measure, what does horizontal progression do? Well, if it's PvP, it often focuses on the balancing of the experience, balancing the playing field. Now, regardless of the sponsorship, I would have still used Guild Wars 2 for this example. Having the mist PvP arena which levels everyone to max, gives everyone equal equipment and lets you compete in a fair fight. But
real quick, a new player can never catch up to a 20-year-old vet in SPS. But the thing is that if you come and do faction warfare and you hop into a Tristan, you can be just as good as I am in that Tristan within like a month or two.
But there are issues with this too. You're directly removing one of the core aspects of the RPG. The progress, and now you're competing on the PvP scene against larger, more established games who specialize entirely in PvP. Ultimately,
every major organization takes and appreciates new bros, most of them have, like the bigger ones have their own new bro cultivating organizations. They have a varying degree of quality, I guess I'd say, but the point is that everybody's important. If all you can do is fly a frigate, that means that you can fly tackle. And that means that you your little I just joined the game 2 days ago could somehow end up being the reason why this 300-man fleet was able to beat this 300-man fleet. Like, and that's the thing is that may sound like a high level thing, but like that is actually super reasonable. I've taken a fleet of brand new bros and changed the course of a major fight simply because we showed up with a whole bunch of tracking disruption and were able to like keep all the Macarials from being able to hit things long enough for our Macarials to kill them, right? Like there are ways for you to impact the battlefield in some really big ways, but also the amount of skills that can apply to any given ship configuration is relatively minimal, right? Like once you've trained your weapon system and its support skills, your tank, and train that race's ship for that thing, or, you know, train the ship skills, you're going to run pretty quickly out of things that will make that particular ship better. Now you have to train something that'll make other ships better. You get what I'm saying? It's about accumulation of options.
Both of these approaches, adding increasing power or adding increasing features, serve to deepen the divide between the player base from the start and finish of the game, and this often ends up needing a stat squish or feature reset to fix, which leads to point 5, when the game simply becomes too vertical or too horizontal, and the gap between players too great. The game has to be brought back to a manageable size for the player base to actually play together.
Did I rewind or skip ahead?
Resets can be complex in different ways. A power-based stat squish mostly just involves reducing the numbers, which never feels good because players feel like you're taking earned power away from them, but can sometimes be justified for the longevity of the game. And while I'm not a fan of the process of removing anything, I can understand the long-term goal they're going for. Like how Neverwinter briefly had damage numbers in the tens of millions and had to reduce all numbers by a factor of several hundred before we ended up hitting trillions. A vertical power-based game has an unusual relationship with stat squishes. They will be needed more frequently, but because they're just reducing the numbers behind the scenes, they're actually very easy to do. Horizontal progress games, however, have a much harder time resetting to a manageable size because the game grows not in numbers, but in features. And a stat squish would be more of a feature squish, removing excess mechanics or talents or skills. And this can
Valamir points out that he's been through a stat squish in both WoW and Final Fantasy, and it never felt less powerful. And that's true, but think about it this way. In both of those games, how much were the developers, how much warning the developers give, and how much anxiety was it clear that the developers had about the player base misinterpreting it, right? Because it is 100% of a psychological thing. That's why I said, like, scarcity feels so bad because it's a context issue more than anything else. It has to do with your relationship with your power, your expectations about your power, and how well everything is communicated to you. You were given the opportunity to fully understand the scope of A, what was happening, and B, why it was necessary.
Can involve changing the fundamental way in which certain playstyles will work.
Even if you didn't
Neverwinter
agree.
is again a good example. When Life Steal, a stat which restored your own health by a portion of the damage you do, was removed, an entire style of tanking was removed from the game with it, and squishy players who relied on aggressive gameplay to survive were now useless. They were just squishy and dead.
That's what made me think of my Rockwall friend.
Feature squish and the removal of lifesteal actually made the game slower and the combat less intense, which was something Neverwinter had pushed away from for many, many years. Resetting vertical power creep feels bad, but is relatively simple. Resetting horizontal feature creep is much more challenging because features are tied to the moment-to-moment gameplay. But let's imagine a major reset does happen and you decide to take a break from the game, because no one likes to lose high numbers or skills they've come to enjoy. This brings up point 6. Taking a break and returning feels very different for both types of design. We've all had that horrible feeling of returning to an RPG after a long time and thinking, what the hell was I even doing? I once returned to Chrono Trigger after a few months away, and after staring at the screen for a minute, I decided to just restart the whole game. Returning to an MMO is a daunting task, and the vertical-horizontal divide heavily changes that experience. Returning to a vertical game feels like starting again anyway. Your items and equipment are often useless and outclassed, and the content you knew is not being run anymore. The player base have all moved on to the latest area, so you're left fighting back up the ladder, doing content no one else is doing because it's just a step you need, but they are past it. Vertical
Clearly
games are
not our
often
problem.
called treadmill games. If you stop running, you fall off, and then you need to catch up. Your friends and guild will shoot off ahead. But there is one good side to this, a silver lining to this cloud. You've got a pretty good idea of what you need to be aiming for. You just head to whatever the highest number is or the newest expansion is. The beauty of having an objectively best choice is you can just make that choice.
So this is actually an important thing, because this does a couple of things. One, this is the reason why somebody who bounces off the game early and then comes back thinks that they might as well start over, even though the SP that they've trained is already useful in progress. It's also so. Hold on. What was it?
Need to be aiming for. You just head to whatever the.
Oh, I cannot explain how useful this is when it comes to actually retaining those returning players, right? If the person, any opportunity to bounce off a person in their early steps is very impactful, right? You want to draw them in as quickly as possible. This is true when you're first trying out the game, but it's also true when the person is returning, because they're the least invested in it at that point, right? So if anything gets in their way, then they may just be like, never mind, right? If they log in and see something and be like, I can't understand this, there's a decent chance that they'll just close it and be like, never mind, I'll come back this later. So the idea of that's one of the reasons why the air program is really good, is because it cancels that as a returning player. But this is also one of the reasons why I've said that the tutorial should be a series of things that can be triggered as often and whenever you would like from the agency or aura or whatever. So that way a returning player can bounce into it. You could argue that events at least gives a returning player something to do, but the problem is that event design often is pretty brutal, pretty demanding, pretty restrictive. So if you're a newer player or a returning player that don't have your wits about you, they're actually a bad thing to go charging into. And to make matters worse, not only are there all these new things that you don't know anything about or even know what's there. Those things could definitely kill you, potentially, or whatever. Probably will kill you if you don't know about them and therefore do the wrong thing. On top of that, the part about the cannibalizing of previous things actually comes and bites us in the ass right now, because even the things that we relied on are now potentially completely different. So even the things I don't know what has been added, and I don't know what has been changed. What do you mean this ship is now a nuding ship? What? Right? Like, that actually ends up being a pretty nasty barrier to entry. On top of that, things have changed so much and so many times in EVE. If you just go onto Google and search for stuff, there is a reasonable chance that you will actually end up with the wrong information. And unfortunately, this is becoming increasingly a problem, even in places that are normally really good about this stuff, like EVE Uni and whatnot. Not saying that they, very, very rarely, but I mean, the point is that if you just, a person who doesn't know what they're doing doesn't know how to evaluate the up-to-date stuff or the true stuff from the old stuff, right? So that's not even really a good solution for them. So I have all this stuff. I don't know what to do with it. If I don't know what else is going on. I know that this stuff is pretty valuable, and I also know that if I make a mistake, I will regret it, and it'll be costly, and everybody will make fun of me, and I'll feel bad. I am going to play No Man's Sky, right? Can't we all see that happening? EVE Uni is great, by the way.
highest number is or the newest expansion is. The beauty of having an objectively best choice is you can just make that choice. Returning to a horizontal game, however, is a bit different. Your equipment often retains its power, and your rare items retain their value because they've not been outclassed, they're now just a variation on something else. So the player base is still doing what you already know, they're just doing it in different ways.
Yeah, the advantage is that if you can get past that initial hurdle, you don't have to necessarily catch up. Everything you have is still valuable. And because it's valuable, even if you don't need that thing anymore, everything's fungible. You can sell it for ISK and then get a different thing, right? If they nerf capitals, you can just, if they nerf the thing that you love to do, when you come back and you need to do something different, you can just sell it and get something else. You might lose some value in it, but I mean, in World of Warcraft, you come back and it was 3 expansions old and it's literally worth nothing.
New systems you need to learn or old skills revamped to work in new ways. I get this feeling whenever I return to old school RuneScape. My skills haven't gone anywhere, my equipment is still useful, there's just new stuff to do in various directions. Returning to a horizontal progression game often feels easier because you feel that you've still got what you left, but now it's also harder to pick a direction because there's no objectively correct or best thing. It's often a case of, what do you want to do? And more often than not, you'll end up thinking, well, I don't know what's worth doing. And
so that's actually the problem from the beginning, right? Like, this is the problem that New Bros come into and all that stuff. But there's actually one more piece to all of this, which is it's fine for us to brush off that you still have all your stuff and therefore you don't really lose anything. But as things like abandoned structures, Pochfin, Nullsec, and other places have taught us, like, the thing is that the deeper you are committed into one of these paths, the more, the harder it will be to step back into it, right? If you just had a bunch of missioning friends, then you could always just log back in and now you have your missioning ship and you're in high sec and you might need to like move to a different missioning hub. If you are part of a null block and you leave the game, there's a really good chance that you're going to come back with all of your stuff in asset safety and your alliance being on the other side of the cluster. If you live in Pochfin or in wormhole space, there's a reasonable chance if you leave stuff in a structure, you won't come back to it, right? Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, the problem is that so much of what we do on the high end, so much of the high end gameplay is not because it's hard to execute or even takes that much expensive equipment. It's more about the Rube Goldberg machine that it takes to actually make the task possible, right? So now that I've gone through all of the effort of getting all the ships in place and I've done all the work that allows me to do the stuff, well, that's the thing that can get pretty easily reset because everything's ephemeral and it burns.
All of this ultimately leads on to the final point. Vertical progression is focused on the satisfaction of the reward over the process. It values becoming powerful in a way others can see and then respect. It often leads to objectively correct choices in gameplay loops and character builds, whereas horizontal progression is more about enjoying the process than the reward itself.
So, again, this is actually my problem, right? So, in Final Fantasy XIV, they have the Island Sanctuary. The Island Sanctuary provides almost no good rewards. Like, it is literally an outfit and one of the most inefficient ways of getting a resource that you can get in other ways, right? Like, objectively, it would be panned in EVE Online. But it's because, like, it is the act of having that place and going through that experience that is the whole point of it and why it is a very popular feature. We lose that. We have lost that in EVE for various reasons. And I think that ends up making us, it cheapens us out of as good of an experience as it could be, because the problem is that a lot of the game is actually designed to be pretty compatible with that, right? With the, you know, there's things to discover, and, you know, does that make sense? Like, there are things to do, but nothing has intrinsic value built into it beyond its ISK output, with the exception of like various different ways of putting your flag in the sand, right? Like being part of faction warfare, being part of null.
Becoming powerful in a way that's personally relevant to you, but not necessarily more socially powerful than any.
Like, I suggested before, what if they use standings to allow us to kind of get some texture to the different empires, especially the pirate ones? So what if you got like 8.0 with the Garistas, they would let you access their smuggler gate network, that you now actually get to see the beacons for these smuggler gates, which are effectively just another set of stable wormholes that rearrange themselves every day, you know? And therefore now you have a random but useful way to get around that other people may not necessarily have.
Anyone else. Vertical games encourage the players to play by adding new things for the players to chase, the allure of power and the dominance over other players and over the game itself. In a vertical game, power is the driving force. The journey is simply a step on the route to power. Horizontal design adds content for the players to experience.
So here's the thing. When you have a vertical perspective on a non-vertical game, that's where this kind of breaks down, right? Because if you have a vertical progression, you're like, I want power, but the way I get it is by getting this item and this item and this item and this item, and I get this item here and this item here, and I have to do this here, and oh, I didn't get this one this time. You have to do different things. Given the fact that everything distills down to the one metric of power, that makes it so that like it kind of begins to collapse, right? It makes it so that we naturally narrow our focus and reject things that are not profitable.
And the value of the experience itself is the valuable thing, even if you have nothing to show for the experience beyond memories and enjoyment. The satisfaction of gaining power is replaced with the personal satisfaction of overcoming a gaming challenge. Here's an interesting example. In Guild Wars 1, you can...
So, to put it a different way, why aren't people learning the Abyss to be able to beat the Tier 6 Abyss because they want to be able to do it? Why do we mostly hear about how good of an ISK it is, and they reluctantly go through the process of gaining the ISK or the, you know, whatever in order to do it, and they usually try to do it with cutting as many corners as possible, because the objective is that they want to be able to like milk it for ISK. There aren't that many players that take the most extreme things and then do it to do it. I'm not saying do it forever. What I'm saying is, why don't I hear very many people take up the objective of, I am going to learn the Abyss with the objective of getting to be able to do Tier 6 Abyss. I could just never do it again after that, but now I have that option. It's unlocked to me, and I can do it. It's not worth doing. Do you know how much you'll learn in that process? Like, the thing is that we're talking about a new player, and we're talking about one of the major issues is that they don't have a direction. That singular goal will cause them to learn so much about the game, achieving it, that whenever they do achieve it, they've pretty much opened up the oyster for themselves, right? They have a really good way of making ISK. They understand a lot about flight mechanics. They know a lot about E-War and other pieces like that. Yeah, I seriously believe that it's because we do require like a little trophy. We need a little doodad that says, yep, you did it. Good job. even though we want to do it and feel awesome, if the game itself doesn't call it out, we feel it's being cheapened. That's my theory.
Actually use the bonus input to just get given some of the best weapons in the game from the very start.
That being said, I will say that the people that I see this out of the most, the people that are like, I've set this goal for myself and I'm doing it, are newer players. And the problem that I run into is when that person runs into an experienced player, often that experienced player's advice that they come to the experienced player to get is stop doing that thing that you're doing. It's not worth doing. Here's the simple thing. Go hit nails with a hammer.
You can use them immediately. So you'd be thinking, why am I playing the game? There's very little I can get that's better than what's been given to me. But
it's not a singular experience, actually. I've set several small groups. Whenever I run into like 2 or 3 guys that are all, or people, I guess, trying out Eve for the first time, I teach them about Frigate Abyss. Frigate Abyss is a great way for newer players to play together, use the fact that they're working with each other as a strength, and then by the time that they stop getting whacked in the abyss over and over again. Hold on. Right, but once they can get to tier 2, that same group of people are very, very close to being able to go to hook bills and then jump up to tier 5. I also said that didn't have to be their goal. I was saying, why don't we hear that? And I was just using that as like the example. You can also say tier 5 is your goal. And my point is that I hear a lot of new bureaus having these kinds of things. They have smaller goals, but that gets them to seek out answers. But those answers tell them that their goals aren't worth doing. Oh, that's not profitable. That it's whatever. When they weren't learning, they weren't doing that task, they weren't building that ship, they weren't running the abyss, that run of the abyss necessarily in order to make their fortune. They were doing it to understand the industry system or to, whatever. It's just a practical exercise. So yeah, I wish that the abyss in particular was able to be used as the training mechanism it really can be with the additional support. But yeah, it is unironically a really good way for newer players to learn how to fly as frigates or destroyers. Oh yeah, the guys who can do tier 2. Maybe I miscommunicated. The group of 3 people who can consistently do tier 2s can likely jump up to tier 4, tier 5 in hook bills, right? If you can run tier 2s, really tier 2 is actually almost too hard. You run tier 1s with like triple kestrels in a dark until you never make any mistakes. And then maybe you see if you can, like you might lose a few trying to do the tier 2, but as long as you can do a tier 2, then you're usually ready to either step up to a hawk or step up to a like hook bills or whatever and just dunk it. How do I find new goals to keep playing Eve? What would you suggest to be a good way for a solo player to branch out from solo PvP junk? So it's getting better, and hopefully there's going to be more stuff coming with the expansion that's coming. But one of the ways that I do it, honestly, is if you go here into your personal, you can see your activity tracker, which doesn't have any data right now because I'm Singularity. But that has like all of the different kind of activities there are in the game and whatnot, and how much you've done them, and let you earn up points or rank up or whatever in them. Heron Navy. So that's a good way to hunt for things. And then of course the air career track is a good way. But honestly, unironically, the best way to figure out what to do in Eve is to get out there and just start poking around. Like something weird is going to happen. Something's going to lead to another. Just get out there and start doing stuff. Poke around, look at things.
While I was playing, I realised that's not the point of Guild Wars 1. The numbers are incredibly low and the items are relatively easy to get. You play for the enjoyment of the process of playing, not...
Okay, and this is the biggest problem. So that is actually a huge piece of all of this, right? Oh, you can't see it. Yep. Hold on. Let's listen to that again.
Am I playing the game? There's very little I can get that's better than what's been given to me. But while I was playing, I realised that's not the point of Guild Wars 1. The numbers are incredibly low and the items are relatively easy to get. You play for the enjoyment of the process of playing, not necessarily the gaining of power. So when...
Okay. So that pretty much brings a lot of this home, which is most players, new players that I see, sure, some of them have like seen some big fleet battle, and so they're trying to figure out how to get one of them Titans. But a lot of new players at their newest, I'm not talking about like week 2 when they're already frustrated, they've lost a ship or whatever. I'm talking about I am having difficulty finishing this tutorial level good. These guys, a lot of them are here because they want to fly around in space. My friend who got me into Eve, all he does, even to this day, when I finally drag him back into Eve every once in a while, is he'll do like low-level missions with relatively like an Algos or something like that, whatever, because he just loves the idea of like warping his ship out, launching his drones, sitting back and sipping his coffee like a goddamn starship pilot while he watches it all play out. That's his enjoyment, man. I can't make him do anything else. It doesn't matter what kind of reward it has, right? Because that's what he's doing it for. That's what he's logging into Eve for. I know a lot of people who are in Eve for the cool shit in Eve, not for the power. So I just wish, because and then on the other hand, there's so much for those people to find and do and enjoy, but it doesn't get presented to them very well. And that method of looking at the situation is devaluated by experienced players because of the always on competitive PvP kind of nature of Eve, right? So that's a big reason why CCP has been working so hard on the MPE, because for a long time it's been about like, well, CCP doesn't want to tell us what we're doing, right? Or why we're doing things or whatever. That it's all about our, the player's experience. And for the purposes of the sandbox, that's correct. But a new player needs a path. To have a choice, you must first know what that choice is. If you tell me to do something, right now, the Gallente and the Caldari have both given orders to secure Othanoon. You must go there and do everything you can to kill everybody who's in there, work with the militia, take it over. That's what you're supposed to be doing right now. 07, thank you, Evenington. Are you going to? Yes, no. That's your choice. That choice exists. If you decide to not engage in the event that happens starting next week, that's fine. No one's going to hate you for it. And the only thing you lose out is in the experience of doing it, or in like maybe the early, it's probably some ISK because it's got new stuff in it or whatever, right? Like if you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. If you want to do it, then it's there. But if CCP didn't put that event there, there would be no choice. I can't choose to work for the Caldari if the Caldari don't tell me what to do. But if they tell me what to do, I can choose to do it or work against it, or to do nothing. That is why CCP, as the E in PvE, their job is to make the universe do things. And it's our reactions to those things that are happening that spiral out into the meta narrative of conflict, etc. No, like in a meta level. Like there's no, you don't go like down like a chain that you're required to, like there are a few like arcs or whatever, but it's not like you select a class and then go through a whole story. Or, you know, like when you're doing a mission, this is what you're being told what to do and you're getting paid. But there's no like meta story as to why you're doing missions, if that makes sense. So, yeah, it's like a D&D campaign with CCP playing as a dungeon master. So that's the problem. So we need things to be happening. Even if you're not into faction warfare, all of this stuff happening will lead to things. It'll lead to people going and taking part. It'll lead to new items coming out. It'll lead to an opportunity to go down there and kill everybody who's in that one constellation trying to do stuff. It'll be an opportunity to talk about it for hours on end on podcasts and such. Yeah, emergent gameplay is the best part of EVE, but emergent gameplay comes from catalysts, right? It comes, emergent gameplay emerges from somewhere. Well, I might be in my own little echo chamber at this point, but it looks like a lot of people agree with me.
When you log into any MMO, ask yourself, why are you playing? Do you enjoy the process itself, or is the process simply a means to an end? Do you want to be objectively better and more powerful than others, or do you want to be as powerful in a different way? Do you want to be part of the race, constantly pushing forward into the more powerful, more difficult content, or are you content to go and do the older stuff because it still has meaning to you and isn't yet outdated? Are you a vertical progress player or a horizontal experience player? Let me know.
So this actually leads to a couple of problems too. Like, for instance, that last line, right? Do you do old content because it's still relevant? So old content that is still relevant is going to have a desire to be done. Here we get things like incursions, right? Like, incursions is undoubtedly old content, but it's still relevant. But it's only relevant because of its ISK, which means no one's interested in the experience. Even somebody who's like coming in, your job is to learn what's going on and do it correctly. It's not about being creative. It's not about, you know, whatever. It's about knowing what's supposed to happen and doing it as quickly and efficiently as possible to make the most ISK as possible, because it's 10-year-old content. It's just forced to remain relevant just because its rewards are so much higher than some other options. So, and what if you're in a descending spiral? Reach out, get help. ISK matters because we lose ships to not afford to replace them anymore. Yes, absolutely. But the thing is that leads me to another thing that I like to remind people about, which is that we focus so much on the ISK generation side of the house when it comes to how to deal with this problem. But it is far more effective to deal with it on the output side of things. In other words, if you learn faction warfare flying around in 5 million ISK ships, then you will need to earn way less ISK than if you fly around in 80 million ISK worms. Now, will you win as many fights? Probably not. Will you get as much experience? Maybe, maybe not. But you can limit, or another example is like, if you can pay, I can pay 2 billion ISK to make 2 million more tick or whatever, right? Like, I'm just saying that often I find that people become obsessed with maximizing their ISK per hour and not minimizing the cost it takes for them to get it. Does that make sense? This is why I say it's better to learn with cheap stuff on low tier, because you can learn the same lesson in a Hawk in a tier 5 or a Kestrel in a tier 1. Do you want to pay 5 million for that lesson, or do you want to pay 70 million for that lesson? Because it's coming. You got to learn it one way or another. Is this to determine if EVE is horizontal? Well, this is we're looking at Eve from the concept of horizontal versus vertical design. As he even said, like most horizontal design systems can actually have verticality in it. So the answer is that Eve Online is a horizontal system with some verticality. However, the metagame that we have built on top of Eve is absolutely a vertical design. You do not work to gain additional options necessarily within the metagame. You work to gain additional power within the metagame. As an alliance, that is what you do. Now, there are some examples of like, oh, we're going to work together to build our Titan so that way we have the ability to bridge. But for the most part, on an alliance level, we're playing a vertical game. And on a horizontal level, or sorry, on an individual level, especially the newer you go, it's designed as a horizontal game. And the problem is that means that sets up bad expectations for the people that are evaluating it as a vertical game. And it's making a lot of the actual work and value of the game as a horizontal game not actually come to fruition because it's not seen as valuable to do. Right? I think that's it.
No, in the comments below. Another massive thank you to Guild Wars 2 for sponsoring this video.
And another massive thank you to Josh Hayes for putting up this video and letting me comment to it. No, it's actually really funny. I'll close this out by saying that this morning, I've been wanting to react to this video for like the last week or since he came out with it. But I was kind of nervous. Like he actually made he had a whole arc about reaction videos and how the reaction meta is just about like playing the video while staring at it. And you know, what constitutes good reaction. So I was kind of angsty about it. But then today I tweeted because I wanted to be able to say like, at least I said something about it. So I tweeted like, I'm going to be reviewing Josh Hayes' blah, blah, blah in how it relates to EVE Online. And the dude liked my tweet. So at that point, there was no backing out. So with that said, I appreciate you guys for hanging out and taking part. I thought it was an interesting discussion. If you have any thoughts about it, you can go ahead and put them in the comments below on YouTube. But until next time, I do want to thank my sponsors and supporters, the people who sub on Twitch and watch my stuff and my videos and share those videos around, because we want to increase overall EVE literacy. So you can always share around my playlist about EVE Online, like the guides, like my 6 hours of every single module in the game, basically. You know, let's help each other. Let's help raise EVE literacy together. But I also especially want to thank Kuhn, Abyssus, Jenny, Elange, Fatewinder, Kotoba Manac, Fayssal, Seedsaplenty, Divoolej, Lares Hane, Gragnor, YellowCladKing, Zaul Nex, BlackRoseNoble, Dajat Lemmont, MidnightSpaceMonkey, NotJustFun, Serenalen with no eyes, Syliana Vel'ash, Talking in Stations, Nephilim, and Grendel, as well as my Immortal tier patron, Eboleet. Thank you all. And until next time, I've been Ashrathi, the voice of New Eden, and I'll see you in space. Nope. Stream's not actually over. We'll hang out for a few more minutes, at least. All right, I think that was good, man. I thought that was cool. That went towards the top end of my hopefulness for it. 2 more hours. I only have an hour and a half at max, so I was thinking like 30 minutes or something. But I actually was thinking about wrapping up early so that way I can run across to the store and grab something before my son gets home. Yeah, the YouTube video. That's what's going to be cut out for the YouTube video. So let's think. Speaking of my YouTube, go ahead and keep an eye on that, because either today, I haven't decided when exactly I want to come out with my video about the event next week. I feel like I kind of got it out early last time, so then by the time the event actually came out, it was kind of out of the YouTube cycle. But I could release it as early as Sunday. Actually, it's funny. My son really hates belts. He refuses to wear them. I could release it as early as today and as late as, Monday, maybe. What is the most powerful ship in game, or is there not one? Well, so again, like, there is a... Oh, I forgot one of my points. I forgot one of the big points. I might try to edit this in. But, like, one of the big points... So, okay. So let's think about what exacerbates... There's a big thing that I think it makes that vertical progression problem more serious for EVE Online, right? Why we have this emergent behavior of vertical design, even though the game is mostly horizontal. Well, first of all, there's the obvious solution, which is the death is a serious matter. When that is true, there's a survival instinct that kicks in. And so being able to gain the ability to overpower that feeling is a big part of that, right? That it naturally sets it up. But I think that EVE actually does one thing in particular with its design that really, really makes this problem worse. And that is capital design. Yay, I brought it back to... That's all supers. The problem here is that capitals have carriers, supercarriers, dreadnoughts, and titans. In essence, supers are more or less better carriers, and in Faxes, sorry, and dreads scale up to titans pretty well, as like titans are stronger dreads, and Faxes are the healers. So you have damage dealers with fighters, and the Repper. Technically, you could say that the supers have their E-War bursts and stuff like that. But the bottom line is, we go from... Let's see. We go from this to this. This is why we have a verticality problem. Because all of the complexity, all of the different options and different stuff that they put in here, this crushes them all. Or like this, by crushes, I mean like collapses all of the options down to only a handful at the top level. And since that's the top level, it's like, congratulations, you played this horizontal game all this time, and then when you hit capitals, there's such a jump that it suddenly becomes a vertical game. I think that the lack of detail and complexity in the upper bounds of EVE's design makes this problem so much worse. Because the problem isn't that everybody wants a Titan. It's that it's a Titan. It's not like we're arguing about like a logistics ship versus a hack versus a, whatever else. What I'm saying is that like these things are such a scale of their own that the other things don't necessarily stand as much of a consideration, especially in the most important things, quote unquote. Jita, I am actually more talking about it before before the scarcity and the capital nerfs and all that stuff. This was the big problem then, and they've reined it in a little bit now. But ultimately, this is why it's difficult for them to rein it in, right? Because you step up to capitals, it's now capital world. It's very difficult, except for like the lowest tier capitals, for these things. Oops, wrong screen. It's very difficult for these subcapitals to have that much impact in the capital world, especially by the time you get to super capitals. Especially at super capitals, everything is, by the time you get to super capitals, you've collapsed everything into titans and super carriers, and that's just not. It smashes a lot of the nuance. So you can dock capitals, and you can dock supers in keep stars, which are like the biggest player stations. So this is where a lot of that stuff about like, well, subcapitals need to be able to affect capitals. A lot of that kind of angst, the powering up of battleships to try to bring them closer in line with capitals. All those things kind of play into this fact that we have all of this complexity in EVE combat, but really all of it is a sham because the important fights involve 8 ships and maybe whole fleets of other stuff. Awesome, James. Next Tuesday is going to be fun. So yeah, I think that that's a big thing to kind of extract from this discussion, because it is vertical in that sense. It has an end game in that sense. And so you can't blame the people that use these tools in their major struggle, i.e. sovereignty, to look at it that way. Capitalization, hold on. There's a lot of cool stuff involved in capitals. There's a lot of nuance here and there. There's important decisions that must be made. A lot of those important decisions happen on a meta level. In other words, it's like fleet level decisions. But this goes back to what Hilmar was saying about how Titans are really simple to play while frigates are really complex to play, and how that's backwards, right? Well, there is a world arc, but the world arc isn't something that players can have. You think that I'm 80% wrong? I am open to discussing such things. I like discussing it. I'm not sure if I'd go with 80% wrong, but maybe. I'm just looking at what's there and trying to be like, what does what the video talked about, if we evaluate what's been going on in EVE and what has gone in EVE and what happens in EVE, how do those two things what can we take from it? And so by asking ourselves, like, the people that look at things from a capital perspective rightfully look at it as a vertical problem. At least, especially before scarcity. There are faction titans. That's true. CCP really has not, like, the entire faction capital meta has developed almost independent of CCP, which is really cool. And I think that there's, like, totally a place for that. I'm not even saying that this is a bad thing. I'm not saying that capitals need to be changed. But if we're aware of what the effect is, we can look into other things. It might bring us to novel solutions, or just circumvent the problem altogether, right? If this is a high-end choice issue, then giving people different kinds of high-end objectives might be the thing. If this is a choice at high scale level, maybe there should be different kinds of capitals that have other kinds of really powerful ability, or, useful abilities. So that way there's different kinds of things that happen. You get what I'm saying? Like, understanding the problem this way, or at least looking at the problem this way, might allow us to gain different kinds of insight. Not that it's 100% correct. I guess I should also put in that disclaimer that I'm not that much of a nullsec guy. So if somebody like Redline says differently about how things go, I would trust him over me. Mining Titan when? Valamir, I'm gonna give you like 20 seconds to figure it out. I have faith in you. It's a rock wall. Mining is dead because CCP and scarcity. I mean, except people are still mining. Just not rock walls. You want a Titan bridge? There's been a joke about a Titan doomsday for mining, where you could just like, if you angle the lance right and it just blasts through a bunch of rocks and just mines everything in that cone or in that line. Look at pre-scarcity number compared to mining now, 90% reduction. That's because the rock walls were mining too much. Pre-scarcity, there was too much mining. That was the problem. That's how we got there. Yes, there is less overall mining happening now that rock walls are not mining more than every other ship combined times 6. That also feels like a big percentage. I'm not trying to undermine or minimize the fact that the player base has been angsty and shrinking and all that kind of stuff. It has been spooky for sure. I could always go into the argument about like, well, the expansion coming and like now is the lull between the expansions, so you can't necessarily expect it to be popular, blah, 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 blah. But the really point is that, yeah, a lot of people have quit, but I don't think it's just because the rock wall can't mine anymore. And if it is, I have a video that I just put up yesterday that you should watch. It's short. It's not even 6 hours. It's like 2 minutes. What update is coming next week? The Uprising pre-event. So we're going to get, actually, let me link it again. Eve Pandora, thank you for joining us down the rabbit hole, Eve Online. And thank you to all the people that like subbed and, or not, I don't know if they're subs, but followed and such and subbed on YouTube during the presentation. I don't usually do my shticks during the presentation because they go to YouTube. But yeah. Also, Valamir, start like giving some of these guys shout outs for the other streamers. Tut tut, Valamir. All right. I'm kidding. Also, what's interesting is that I actually, of all of the things, I've witnessed a lot of change is bad, grr, I'm quitting moments in Eve, right? The HTFU moments, if you want to look at it that way. They happen pretty frequently. However, what I find uniquely interesting about this particular iteration of grr, I'm quitting, is that most of them openly admit that they're not actually quitting. It's, I unsubbed 19 out of my 23 accounts. I'm down to just 4. And given the problems that we had before, there's a reasonably good chance that that is the goal, right? I mean, yes, there are still people quitting, but an unusual number, like most of the people that I hear saying that they are quitting are saying that they are quitting. Okay, Kamina, let me explain. Prior to scarcity, we had kind of, well, around 2015, 2016, we had an expansion named Citadels. Starting with Citadels, CCP did a capital rebalance and a structure rework. By rework, I mean they released an entirely new set of structures to replace the old ones. Player structures. So the entire kind of thing was they were giving the nullsec or giving players more options. We were gaining We were going to be able to like run our own industry facilities and all that kind of stuff. So more and more things were shifting over to the players. Nullsec was given more and more tools to build their empires. Nullsec, as empire building, became locked in during that time. And so, especially those within the null blocks were able to become fabulously wealthy. Combine that with the fact that effectively it became kind of like a race to see who could like make the most money over time. And attacking your opponent's resources is expensive, or is risky, and therefore has cost. So it became more efficient for everybody to, for the most part, turtle up and just power grind for like 2 or 3 years. During this process, the thing is that once you start getting into tasks that no longer require or have a very low action per minute, like mining, you can scale this up pretty quickly. So suddenly, now my limit for how much ISK I can make is based on how many clients I can be running at the same time, because I have that many Rorquals hoovering as much as I want, right? And the thing is that having that many Rorquals actually makes it harder to attack them, because the Rorquals are capital ships and pretty combat capable in that regard. So if I have 20 Rorquals, not only am I making a ton more ISK, but those 20 Rorquals are actually safer, because it's very hard for somebody to be ready to drop on it, right? So this really set people's expectations. And scarcity was basically a reaction to that. The economy was going up and up and up. Things were getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Minerals were, the efforts of newer players were being devalued because these more powerful things, the Rorqual could mine as much as 1,000 new bros or other mining ships. Yeah, they have to be mega. But that's the thing. If I'm making that much money, then I can plex those accounts, right? That's just cost of doing business. I'm only doing this because it makes money above and beyond the cost to plex the account. Combine that with the final aggravator in all of this, which is around that same time, they introduced skill extraction and skill injection. Prior to that, everyone had to train every single skill on their own by waiting for those skill points to earn, or buying completed characters on the skill bazaar. By allowing us to extract our skill points and then sell those skill points on the market, what it does is allow us to subsidize our Omega accounts by selling the skill points earned during that month. And for a long time, that was literally profitable. You could sell the skill points earned in a month for more than it costs to make for a month of Omega, plus the cost of actually making the skill extractor or skill injectors. So what that means is that if all that matters is how many accounts you have. Well, they were just working within the rules. Now, CCP fixed it in several ways. For the most part, it is below now that at profitability levels, but it still significantly subsidizes your cost. If you already have the skills that you want, you don't need any more skills right now, then you could just be Omega for the cost of fiddling with it once a month. Does that make sense? So during that time, it became less, how do I afford an additional account, to what do I do with, I have 50 plus Omega accounts. What do I do with them? Right? So you see the rise of massive scale multi-boxing and huge farms. And then, so that's why when I say, like, if you're in your process of complaining about quitting, you tell me how many like that you've unsubbed it, like 15 subs, but you still have some left, I think that CCP may actually call that a victory, because having that capability has seriously damaged the social aspect of the game, if not just the balance of the game, right? Yeah, and everything in Eve is N+1. So this issue becomes a really serious deal real quickly. Except CCP has pretty well, I mean, like, yeah, they made less money, but that money was cancer. They were making money from hurting the game. It was like, if they had just continued to allow that to happen because the subs were good, that would have been selling out the game for the cash. They are accepting that they will no longer have 20-man farms and stuff, that one person won't be giving them 20 accounts. They accept the fact that they're going to go back to the average number of accounts that a player having being 1.5 like it was in 2014. But if that restores the quality of the game for the people that are playing it. If you just deal with everything with 15 characters, then you are not only not really participating in the social aspect of it, you're probably being a detriment to it, because you're competing with groups of people. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, ultimately, CCP had a choice to fix the systemic problems or keep everybody happy. You're like hitting all of the nice little talking points. So CCP invests an amazing amount of money into EVE Online compared to the way that most companies pump into their 20-year-old games. But even if you assume that, like, the London office and other stuff, those other advancements, A, bring in more people, B, often end up more profitable, or, being profitable in the end, and C, here's the thing. The EVE community is incredibly volatile, as we've been talking about, right? Like, this goes back to the Summer of Rage. The Summer of Rage taught CCP a lot of lessons, but one of the things that it taught them was that we were willing to hurt them, willing and capable of hurting them financially, because we don't like what they're doing in a way that other games usually can't pull off because of the single-sharded nature of EVE. This gets them to realign their focus in a good way, but it also tells all of their investors that they're volatile, right? They're one wrong step away from 20% of their company falling away, like it did in 2011. And that makes their company inherently less valuable. You want to have other product lines. You want to have multiple revenue streams. You want to have a broad base. And with a universe and IP as awesome as EVE is, it really does deserve more avenues to engage with it. Summer of Rage literally shuttered an entire CCP studio, killed off an entire game, a few other things. Yeah, that's my notification sound. I'm gonna stuff it underneath the pillow again. So, yeah, CCP's attitude is what hurts EVE. EVE cannot make another game. Look, I will say that EVE is a game that succeeds in spite of CCP instead of because of it on many occasions. What is your definition of making games and failing? I have actually a really good video where we walk through the entire history of, like, the EVE shooters. literally moment, like event by event. That's exactly right, Kamina. That's the thing. What I witness, what I see right now, what I run into right now are people complaining about how shitty Eve is now and how much worse it is than it used to be, but can't really define what it was, what it is that is now worse, and new players that are loving the shit out of it. CCP is great because of the play. I mean, like, insofar as we've created an interesting story, sure. But I would also argue that our community has been as big of a problem for retention as it has been positive for retention. The amount of toxicity that's allowed, especially in bigger groups, especially when bigger groups are assumed to be like the correct thing to do, it does have an impact and turns people off. Eve is making an RTS. Well, they're licensing another company to make an RTS. The RTS genre is basically dead. It depends on how much you're willing to give MOBAs as being an RTS. I am out of water. Oh yeah, the game is absolutely improved. And remember, so another piece of this is EVE Online, like anytime there's a change, the theme is adapt or die, right? We say this all the time. But if you think about it, that means that there is a percentage of the population, regardless of what it is, that will die. Well, what does dying look like in this case? Dying is a failure to adapt. Dying is a failure to adapt to the point where you quit the game, right? Because that's death in EVE, if you think about it that way. So the people who are complaining on the forums with a bad understanding of what's going on, or mad because things are changing, even though those changes are largely beneficial, the people that are making these arguments, some of them are just, they're dying. They're not adapting. And as far as the people are leaving the game thing, remember the video? It's a wide game. And on top of that, it's a free-to-play game. The kicker to that is, that means that, like, in a free-to-play game in particular, it is actually, like, they don't mind if you leave, because they know that if they, you'll come back if it attracts you again, right? We don't know how many people are going to be returned because of the expansion. We don't know how many people are going to check out EVE because of the expansion, right? Like, it could be very possible that tomorrow there's a dev blog that makes it so that all the people that quit out of anger, their problems have been resolved. I don't know, some magic one, right? We're lowering the cost to 15 again, and introducing new nullsec sites and Tech2 Titans and other stuff too. Haha, we've been keeping it secret, right? Like, what I'm saying is that there is a state. Well, they don't come back. You say that, but I'm just saying, like, okay, this is like industry stuff, right? This is in free-to-play circles. Like, the idea is that because it's free-to-play, they don't quit. They're just not playing right now. How do they measure how many who or why people quit? I think that they check, like, once an account has not logged in for a period of time, that account is considered inactive. Yeah. But I mean, like, look at people make fun of it all the time, but I'm sure they wouldn't be continuing to do it if it wasn't valuable to them. The offers that they give for you to buy the skill points that you failed to earn because you were unsubbed or didn't have your skill queue running or whatever. they don't know why. I mean, like, they've been working on metrics and stuff like that quite a bit. Like, that is actually one of the biggest focus in 2019. That is actually the thing that was like the catalyst to all of this, was that they put in new metrics and a new focus on metrics, and they realized that there were things that were horrifyingly wrong. And then they got bought out around that same time. They got bought out by Pearl Abyss. So then they no longer had to be like chasing the dragon to pay off their loans. So they didn't have to like curtail to us at exactly every moment because, oh my God, we can't have another bad expansion. We can't have another bad event. We can't even pay the bills that we have, right? Because they have all these loans from the development that they were trying to do, but those things got canceled or didn't come through because of this. And so they were saddled with these loans that they were trying to pay off for a long time, and it continued to be a problem for them. And so that's one of the, like, being purchased by Pearl Abyss offered them a ton more freedom. And again, you see a focus more on making a quality game, not making the current player base happy. There is the final conspiratorial, cynical side of things, which is one of the big problem that we're talking about here. The real thing, the thing that is actually causing the problem, are people with fabulous amounts of wealth and power. People who have so much ISK that they have effectively trivialized the death as a serious matter. People that individuals now have the ISK that entire alliances would be happy to have 10 years ago. You can't put that genie back in the box. So what do you do? Well, look, the problem is that we're all living in the same world. New people can't rise if old people don't quit. The cycle must turn. The new players are not having the same experience that we had because we didn't have us affecting their experience. Does that make sense? No, I'm not saying Classic Eve. I'm saying, like, we got to keep this in perspective. So if features happen to push out the big and powerful, it also opens it up for new blood with a new perspective, and they can foster a different culture with that turnover. And I feel like that's kind of what we've been seeing in part, right? The things that we've seen is like, if these are the things that make you quit, then they don't want you here anymore. Everything from the changes that they've made to 1.01 isking, to industry, to fucking introducing Doctor Who into the lore. If this is the straw that breaks your back, then we need other people. We need people who are down with the clown with this stuff, that grow up with this stuff, right? The newer players aren't necessarily complaining about how bad the industry system is because there wasn't a change to them. It's like Kamina here said earlier, didn't even know what is new content. Didn't realize that missions are 17 years old and Abyss is, God, like, oh my God, like 5 years old now. Jesus. Okay, well, whatever. That totally made me lose my point. But, oh yeah, like, if this expansion, which expansions are designed to be marketing, this is designed to bring in players both back into the game that quit because they were frustrated or disappointed for whatever reason, and bring in new players, bring in a new breed of Eve players in an environment that is far better at constructing decent, engaged, active, dialed-in players, rather than being like, hey, hope you A, get lucky, B, like reading, and C, respond well to sudden and negative events. Because if those three things are not all true, then chances are you're not going to survive in Eve, even though Eve might be a fantastically good game for you. Doctor Who was weird, for sure. But I mean, at the same time, they did make it work. Like, even lore-wise, they had a lot of considerations to make it happen. Content-wise, it was really good. A lot of people really liked it. And it did bring in quite a few people, honestly. I think it comes down to the individual, but CCP can't do anything about that. Sure they can. They can give them options. That's the whole point. Like, we don't want to tell you what you have to do. It's a sandbox. You can do anything you want. But the you can do anything you want answer to a new player is basically a non-answer. You're leaving them in a black room with a dim flashlight. Sure, they can go in any direction, but they don't know what directions do what and which directions have wolves, but they know that they have no idea how to even warp to the Stargate, right? Like that is the moment in time that we're talking about. They need to have paths for them to walk and then walk away from if they want to. The game should try to convince them, like the empires should try to convince them to work for them. So that way when they go renegade and join a player faction, that option means something because you've now walked away from something. Yes, they are. CCP sees themselves as the janitors. Well, so here's the thing about faction warfare. If there's any one place in this game that should mechanically be controlled or influenced by the lore or intimately entwined with it, it's faction warfare. It's the game style where you have voluntarily opted to forward the agenda of one of the NPC factions. You're not forwarding the agendas of a player faction. You're not getting your own alliance's name out there. You're doing it for the NPCs. So yeah, that's the exact people that you want to engage with when it comes to the lore. They've already said that they're opting in to wanting orders from the NPCs. LowSec is the most important and most neglected piece of space. Prove me wrong. As faction warfare lives and dies, so LowSec lives and dies. LowSec appears neglected right now because faction warfare has been neglected. And because Snuff has super capitals. Absolutely, but if somebody ain't into it, then they won't do it. Yeah, well, yes. The things have to be fun. That's the other thing. Like, so much of Eve reward structure was made not necessarily to make the activities fun because they want things to be work, so that way what you buy with that ISK is meaningful, or at least loss of it is meaningful. But, like, you can make activities that are fun to do and still also, quote-unquote work. Our standings changing with faction warfare. The main reason I haven't tried is because I don't want to be excluded from certain space. So, as I was in faction warfare for 5 years, and I can still go everywhere. You can't go to you can't go to the opposite faction's empire's space while you are in faction warfare. But as long as you're not doing like the faction warfare missions, it will take you a long time to pull your standings down far enough that you have problems with that. Thanks, Valimir. Evelore sucks. I looked 2 years before I found you. I still don't know why the Minotaur were enslaved. Okay. I'll tell that story. Man, I'm going to go get a cup of water so that way I don't have problems with my mouth. And then I will explain to you why the MR why the Minotaur are enslaved, and then we'll wrap things up. Well, Kamina, good news. A lot of it's changing. So, and the things that are important next week are different. And Aderon Robotics and faction warfare is designed to be good for newer players. So it is easy to find faction warfare groups that work with newer players. Aderon Robotics specifically specializes in it. All right, I'll be right back. I don't have a BRB thing right now. I'll just put on the opening. Gotta leave you with something pretty. All right. Yeah, so the primary reward in faction warfare is LP, for sure. But if you work it right, that is actually a lot of ISK. Kamina, you can go ahead and join my Discord and then DM me and ask me any questions that you want. I'll give you as neutral of an answer as I can. Okay. So the Amarr, the story of why the Minmatar are enslaved is the story of the Amarr. Okay. First things first, the Amarr are complete losers historically, just the biggest losers in the cluster. They, what we know about them from pre-history is when we lived in Terra, which is, Earth, in our solar system here in real life, they started, they were part of the United Catholic Church, and they built a colony on one of the planetoids in the Kuiper, or in the asteroid belt. But a few years later, they were kicked out, and the next thing we hear from them is that they drift through the wormhole like a few thousand years, or, like a while later. So already kind of having an issue. Then they land on Athar, which is the most arid planet of the three Empire Homes planets. And then they get their ass whooped off of the main continent. So they retreat down to this one large island on the planet of Athar. But there, they survive. And their community basically builds this theocracy that kind of starts to rise as they're allowed to be their religious, Puritan offshoot, or whatever you want to call it. So then eventually, one of the other groups of people that lived on the planet, a group by the name of the Eudorians, they were tradesmen, and a shipping vessel came to Athar, and they began some trade with this group. And I think that they're by this point they had started calling themselves Amarians because Amarr was the god. Their religion had evolved away from standard Christianity at this point. to being more about their divine providence, right? The path that is God has brought them here, and they are God's people, kind of stuff. So when the Eudorians begin trading with them, well, with trade becomes culture. And so the Amarians started to exchange with the Eudorians, and it started to give them ideas. And ideas to a theocracy isn't great. So to respond to this, the Amarian leaders at the time created a concept called the reclaiming. The reclaiming says that the Amar are the chosen children of God, that all of us are within, like all people live within God's plan. And Amarians were planned to rule, that they alone could bring order and sanity and faith to the cluster. And in fact, it's not even a matter of everybody else needs to convert. It's that everyone is Amarian. They just don't know it yet because they live within their, God has a plan for them. They're living within God's thing. They just are resisting their rightful place in the universe. And the only real way to redeem these lost souls is to bring them under the Amar and give them purpose. With that, they captured the next trading vessel. No, Sabak was way earlier, actually, I believe. Wasn't it? I'm pretty sure. Maybe not. Around that time, yeah, Sabak might have. But no, I thought that was earlier. Either way, we looked into this the other day because we were trying to figure out whether or not the son of Sabak was truly an ancient race. Are there books connected to the lore? Yes. Oh, are the books connected to the lore? I am reading Empyrean Age. Intimately. That is key pieces of our story. Empyrean Age is huge, actually. So the Amar capture this Eudorian vessel, torture the crew, force them to give up their secrets, and use it to launch an attack upon the Eudorian people. They struggle for some time to fight the larger Eudorian group, but then they start making deals with the savage tribesmen that lived in the plains, basically the Mongolians. They were willing to work with them for the purposes of winning against the Eudorians, and over time built a partnership with these guys, acknowledging the fact that they are not true Amarian, but they are clearly blessed by Amar. They are the next closest things. Therefore, we will call these little lords, or in the Amarian tongue, the Khanid. So the Khanid and the Amar conquer Athar and rename it Amar. And from there, they take to the stars. As they travel, whenever they find anyone else, they see these people as being gifts from God that it is their duty to take and train and put to use. And so, and so one day, in the system of Matar, the Mimitar had also gained space flight, but they hadn't actually built stargates yet. One of the things that they did, supposedly, in theory, was that, because they made these massive projects within Matar. But here's the thing, Mimitar, or Patar, the home planet of the Mimitar, is actually one of the most lush, rich planets of the three that people were born on. I guess 4. No, yeah, 4 planets, because 3 systems. And therefore, they weren't as much about fighting. There was 7 tribes, and these tribes have kind of built their own union. And together, they started to build out into the stars, and they started to colonize their solar system, and they even maybe have mined their moon away, one of their moons. And when doing so, this was a mistake because it possibly destabilized the ecosystem within Amar, within Pator, which kind of already caused a climate disaster for them, so they're already weak. Around that same time, the Minmatar finish their first Stargate and light it up, not realizing that what they just did was open up a door for their enemy. Pretty soon, the Amar came in full force, destroyed every single Matari thing in space, and came down onto the planet and blackened the sky and kidnapped everybody they possibly could and enslaved the Matari people. That is known as the Day of Darkness. Hold on. I think everybody who's been here for a while is probably able to guess what I'm looking up right now. Maybe. We'll see. Yeah. Now everybody's pretty sure. So this is what we see depicted in this video is the Day of Darkness. And this guy here is the head of the Minmatar.
Let me tell you who we are. We have a legacy. A legacy that shaped us. A legacy that we've built. We united on this mother world. We rose together as the 7 tribes. One people forging our future. They came to destroy it. They tried to break us, divide us, to scatter the tribes. But we fought back. We rose as brothers and sisters, seizing victory from the vile chains we broke. And today we stand. We stand as the 7 tribes of Matar. We stand as Minmatar.
God, that one's so good. So good. All right. Kamina, have you seen the Caldari one? Who is the race that supplied the Minmatar with arms? Largely the Galente. You know what's funny? Yes, he is blind. Well, he's blind physically. Yes. He was blinded when he was a slave, I think. So it's funny because when I first joined the game, one of the things that they were working on, or one of the things that they said they wanted to do, was make hot links in the game that linked to the Eve wiki articles to let people like kind of get into that. But then that got dropped. So yeah. I mean, we now can have videos in the game. It'd be kind of cool to have some of this stuff. But the truth is that if you want to learn more about the lore, you can either go to my lore portal. You can go to my lore portal and go to EVE Online's official lore portal. Mine is adoran.org/lore, and theirs is universe.eveonline.com, which is where most of the news and stuff comes from. Kamina, have you seen the Caldari video yet? Are they blind by heritage? I didn't realize that. I thought he blinded I thought an event blinded him. But I do know that his yes, it does. Good. He has implants that allows him to see. They talk about it in Sine Wave Omega. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the stream. So I appreciate you guys for coming. If you like what I do, please consider supporting me by going to my Patreon. If not, please just continue to hang out, show my stuff, share my stuff. Check out the YouTube. Like I said, I'll be coming out with that video within the next day or 3. Oh, the man with the stick. That stick is called the Kumok. The Kumok was it was like a mace. It was like a religious scepter that was used by the Amar. And in the earliest days of the rebellion, it basically started with one of the slaves getting a hold of the Kumok of one of their masters and killing him with it. And so the Kumok became a sign of the Minmatar rebellion. All right, if you want to check out my game, I made one. You can get it for free. It's called Playton. It's a puzzle game. You should check it out. If you like it, or if you try it, give me feedback. Let me know. I'd love it. I need to go find Vinyl Electric and probably give him a skin code. Let's see. I'm not sure if I'm going to be on Monday. And honestly, I'm going to have to figure out what streaming for this event is going to look like. So keep an eye on my Twitter or my or my Discord for information. And I'll try to balance getting you guys information about what's going on and participating in it. This is going to be like, it's going to be a difficult balancing act for me. But if you are interested in helping out, make sure the Galente actually get a Stargate, then you can come and join Aderon Robotics. Otherwise, you can join the Convocation of Empyreans and help us maximize player engagement with EVE Online, because that's what we're here to do. Yes, the Caldari one is more relevant to the current content. That's true. But they said that that they'd seen it. That's why if I was going to show the Minmatar one, I needed to at least check to make sure that they'd seen the most recent one. All right, let's find someone to raid. Oh, again, thank you, Eventon and other people. Riley, why are you telling me to post in local when you know I'm on Sissy? What are you even doing? All right, whatever. Let's find somebody. Oh, I owe Vinyl Electric a skin. So we're going to raid over to Vinyl Electric. We're all going to say 07, and then I'm going to give him a skin, and hopefully we'll convince him to do a giveaway with it. Okay? Sound good? All right, get your 07s ready. I've been Ashtarothi. I've been talking about this game. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put EVE into context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Still having dry mouth. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for checking it out. Together we can raise the literacy of EVE Online. Until next time, I'll see you in space.
Bring on the wrecking machine. every city